Millionaire media mogul Jason Maxwell felt his pulse hammer like a drum solo against his ribs. His palms were slick, heart tripping over itself. This wasn't just a wedding, it was a resurrection. 2 years ago, his world had imploded, and today, maybe, just maybe, it would piece itself back together. The crash was a phantom limb, a constant ache. He could still taste the metallic tang of blood, hear the screech of tires that ripped his life in two, plunging him into a black void. Then, like a sunrise, came Emily. Jason inhaled, the scent of lilies and anticipation thick in the air. Emily wasn't just a caregiver, she was his North Star, guiding him through the abyss. She taught him to breathe again, to feel again, to believe in a future he thought was stolen. And now, here he stood, at the altar, ready to pledge forever to the woman who painted color back into his monochrome existence. Footsteps echoed, soft as whispers, down the aisle of the penthouse garden overlooking Central Park. The murmur of Manhattan's elite guests faded, and Jason's breath hitched. He conjured Emily in his mind's eye, the ivory dress, the smile that could melt glaciers. But tonight, something was different, a flicker, like a faulty neon sign in the distance. Jason blinked. A prickle, a foreign sensation behind his eyes, dared to pierce the impenetrable darkness that had been his constant companion. A tiny spark, almost dismissed as imagination, but real. He squeezed his eyes shut, then opened them again, stronger this time. Another blink, confusion warring with a wild, impossible hope. His heart hammered harder, a frantic rhythm against his ribs. Could it be? No, impossible. Then, another flash, and a blurry white shape began to materialize, a ghost in the fog, vague, formless, yet undeniably there. Jason froze, every nerve ending screaming. With each step Emily took, the image sharpened, resolving itself like a Polaroid developing in fast motion. The curve of her dress, the sway of her hips, the graceful glide. And then, as she drew nearer, her face, a soft, indistinct oval at first, then features coalescing, becoming real. It was like watching the world reboot, pixel by agonizing pixel in front of his very eyes. Tears, hot and unexpected, streamed down Jason's face. And then, the shock. He dreamt of this moment, imagined it 1,000 times, but the reality... Emily was more breathtaking than any phantom he'd conjured in the dark. Her eyes, pools of emerald fire, blazed with a love so raw, so pure, it stole his breath. Her smile, a sunrise breaking over a snow-capped mountain, hit him like a physical force. Jason's chest constricted, a painful, exquisite pressure. He couldn't look away, couldn't tear his gaze from the miracle unfolding before him. Emily stopped before him, sensing the seismic shift in the atmosphere, her brow furrowed with concern. "Jason?" she whispered, confusion lacing her voice. He stared, speechless, transfixed. With a voice thick with tremor and disbelief, he choked out, "Emily, I can see you." Her expression shifted, surprise morphing into incandescent joy, then pure, unadulterated emotion. Tears mirrored his, welling in her luminous eyes. Jason drank her in, every detail, every nuance. She was more, so much more than he had ever dared to dream. In that instant, he knew it wasn't just his vision that had returned. A new chapter, vibrant and terrifyingly beautiful, was just beginning. 2 years prior, the day the world tilted on its axis, Jason Maxwell had been a supernova, a titan of the media world, magazines, websites, TV channels, and métiers. His empire stretched across the digital landscape. Power lunches, board meetings, deals sealed with handshakes, and million-dollar smiles, that was his oxygen. That night, leaving a gala fundraiser in his black SUV, the city lights blurring past, a sudden blinding glare erupted in his peripheral vision. A horn blared, a sickening crunch of metal on metal, and then nothing. He woke in a sterile white room, the smell of antiseptic sharp in his nostrils, a crushing weight behind his eyes. Darkness, unrelenting, absolute darkness. Doctors spoke in hushed tones, their words echoing like pronouncements of doom. Visual cortex damage. Technically healthy, they said, but his sight, his connection to the world was severed. Recovery? Uncertain, they hedged their faces grim. Devastation was an understatement. Jason hadn't just lost his sight. He'd lost his empire, his identity, his very self. The world he knew, the world he controlled, had vanished. He retreated into himself, a wounded animal, snarling at offers of help, pushing away friends, family, anyone who dared to breach his self-imposed isolation. Days bled into weeks, weeks into months, each sunrise a cruel reminder of the light he could no longer see. His sprawling penthouse on Fifth Avenue became a gilded cage, each opulent detail a mocking reminder of what he'd lost. He was adrift, lost in a sea of sensory deprivation, convinced his life was over. Then, a soft voice cut through the silence, a gentle hand touched his arm. "Jason, my name is Emily. I'm your physical therapist." Her voice was calm, steady, a lighthouse beam in his storm-tossed soul. At first, he barely registered her presence, a phantom voice in the void. Nothing, no one, could penetrate the wall of despair he'd erected around himself. But Emily was persistent, a quiet force of nature. In the beginning, she was just a voice guiding him through basic exercises, patiently teaching him to navigate his own apartment, to move through the darkness. But as days turned into weeks, Jason began to notice something different. Emily wasn't like the nurses, the doctors, the well-meaning friends who tiptoed around him, their voices laced with pity. Emily, she believed in him, even when he had given up on himself. "You're still Jason," she said one day, her voice firm, "and there's so much more to you than your eyes." He wanted to believe her, desperately, but the doubts were a suffocating blanket. He was no longer the media mogul, the empire builder, the man who commanded attention with a snap of his fingers. He was a broken man, a shadow of his former self. One day, Emily found him slumped on the sofa, clutching a dog-eared business magazine. He hadn't looked at one in months, the glossy pages now meaningless to him. "Still thinking about the empire?" she asked softly, settling beside him. Jason sighed, the magazine heavy in his hands. "What's the point? It's gone. I'm gone." Emily was silent for a moment, but Jason could feel her gaze, unwavering, intense. "Maybe," she said, her voice low, "maybe this is a chance to build a different kind of empire, an empire of resilience." Her words were like a jolt of electricity. No one had spoken to him like that since the accident, with such unwavering conviction, such quiet strength. For the first time in months, a tiny spark of hope flickered in the darkness. From that day on, Emily became more than just a therapist. She became a friend, a confidant, a lifeline. She pushed him to go outside, to explore Central Park, to rediscover the world through his other senses. Slowly, painstakingly, Jason began to realize that even in the absence of sight, beauty still existed. The rustle of leaves in Central Park, the aroma of hot pretzels from a street vendor, the warmth of the sun on his face, small fragments of a world he thought he'd lost forever. And most importantly, there was Emily. She didn't just guide him physically, she nurtured his spirit, coaxing him out of the shadows. When despair threatened to engulf him, she pulled him back, her voice a steady anchor in the storm. When he felt lost, she was his compass. She even made him laugh, a rusty, forgotten sound at first. Then gradually, more freely, Emily became the lighthouse that illuminated Jason's darkness. But even with Emily's unwavering support, moments of despair still clawed at him. One night, after a particularly grueling therapy session, Jason's carefully constructed walls crumbled. "Emily," he said, his voice raw with pain, Sometimes I think it would just be easier if I wasn't here." Emily stopped, her hand freezing on his arm, shocked by the stark honesty in his voice. Then, her voice firm, unwavering, she replied, "Don't you ever say that. You have so much to give, Jason. And I'll be here to remind you of that until you see it for yourself." Jason didn't respond, but her words resonated, a melody that refused to fade. Emily didn't know it then, but she had given Jason something he hadn't felt since the accident, a reason to fight. The whisper of wind through the trees filled Central Park, a soothing symphony of nature. Jason had begun to recognize it, to find solace in it. Emily walked beside him, her hand lightly resting on his arm, guiding him through the familiar paths. Since she'd insisted on dragging him out of his penthouse, these walks had become a ritual, a shared space of quiet companionship. "The sky looks incredible today," Emily said, her voice warm, as always, deep blue with just a few wispy clouds. Jason smiled. He couldn't see the sky, but he could paint it in his mind with her words, fragments of a world he'd lost, now being painstakingly rebuilt. "And the clouds?" he asked, curious. "What do they look like?" "White?" Emily laughed, giving his arm a gentle squeeze. "Fluffy, like cotton candy." "Do you really want to know?" Jason chuckled. "Or are you just trying to distract me?" "Maybe a little of both." Emily admitted, her laughter light and melodic. Their friendship blossomed, nurtured by simple moments like these. Emily showed Jason that the world wasn't as out of reach as he thought, teaching him to navigate it using his other senses. The rough bark of a tree, the tangy scent of street food, the cacophony of city sounds, a symphony of sensations he'd never truly appreciated before. But there was something else, something Jason couldn't ignore, a feeling that grew stronger with each passing day. It wasn't just gratitude, wasn't just reliance, it was something deeper, something more profound. He was falling in love with Emily. It wasn't just the way she made him smile or the way she pushed him to keep fighting. It was everything about her. Her unwavering kindness, her quiet strength, the way she lit up even his darkest days. But with that burgeoning love came a paralyzing fear. What if she didn't feel the same way? Emily was everything he had, his anchor, his light. The thought of losing her friendship was a chasm he didn't dare to contemplate. He buried his feelings deep, choosing the fragile safety of friendship over the terrifying vulnerability of love. One day, Emily arrived at Jason's penthouse with a surprise, a small, rectangular box tucked under her arm. "I have something for you," she announced, her voice bubbling with excitement, placing the box on the coffee table. Jason raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "What's this?" Emily grinned, opening the box to reveal a portable keyboard, sleek and black. "Well," she said, "I know it's been a while, but I thought maybe you could try playing again." Jason's fingers hovered over the keys, an invisible weight pressing on his chest. Music. The piano had been an extension of his soul, his voice in the world. But since the accident, the thought of playing, of bearing that vulnerability was terrifying. The fear of failure, of not being good enough, of fumbling in the dark, was a paralyzing force. "I don't know, Emily," he said, his voice hesitant. "It's been so long." Emily knelt beside him, gently taking his hand in hers. "Jason," she said, her voice soft but firm, "the music is still inside you. You may have lost your sight, but what makes you a musician, that's never disappeared. Just try. For me." He took a deep breath, the scent of Emily's perfume filling his senses, a comforting presence beside him. He closed his eyes and let his fingers glide over the keys. The first notes were hesitant, almost clumsy, tentative explorations in a forgotten landscape. But then, something shifted, a spark ignited. Muscle memory, dormant for months, began to awaken. A gentle melody, hesitant at first, then gaining strength, filled the penthouse, weaving its way through the silence, a fragile thread of beauty in the darkness. Emily closed her eyes, immersed in the music, her hand resting lightly on his arm. When he finished, the silence that followed was broken only by the soft sound of Emily's applause. "That was beautiful, Jason," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "I knew you could do it." Warmth spread through Jason's chest, a feeling he hadn't experienced in years. Pride, accomplishment, a flicker of self-belief. Emily had a way of doing that, of making him believe in himself, even when his own doubts threatened to overwhelm him. As months melted into a year, Jason and Emily's connection deepened, evolving beyond therapy, beyond friendship. They shared stolen moments in Central Park, Emily describing the changing seasons in vivid detail, painting pictures with words. Sometimes, she'd challenge him to guess objects by touch or smell, playful games that sharpened his senses, reminding him of the world's richness, even in darkness. One day, Emily brought him a set of Braille books, thick volumes filled with raised dots. "I want you to read to me someday," she teased, handing him the first book. Jason smiled, but a knot of anxiety tightened in his stomach. Braille, another mountain to climb. "Let's see if you still think I'm amazing," he joked, trying to mask his apprehension, after hearing my stuttering Braille reading. Emily laughed, but her response was laced with a deeper emotion. "Jason," she said, her voice soft, unwavering, "nothing you do or don't do could ever change the way I feel about you." Those words resonated, a comforting melody in the symphony of his life. But beneath the surface, unease simmered. Jason was falling hard and fast for Emily. It wasn't just gratitude, not just dependence, it was a love that bloomed in the darkness, a love that illuminated his soul. But the fear lingered, a shadow in his heart. What if she didn't reciprocate? Emily was his everything, his lifeline. The thought of jeopardizing their bond, of shattering the fragile peace they'd built, terrified him more than the darkness he'd lived in for 2 years. One night, as Emily prepared to leave, Jason hesitated, a question trembling on his lips. "Emily," he began, his voice low, Thank you for everything you've done for me. She smiled, a gentle touch on his arm. Always, Jason. As she walked towards the door, he stood there, paralyzed by fear, the unspoken words hanging heavy in the air. Even if he could never express the depth of his feelings, simply having her in his life, by his side, was enough. Or at least, he desperately hoped it would be. The next day started like any other. Emily arrived early, her usual radiant energy filling the penthouse, chasing away the lingering shadows. She organized the braille books, adjusted his mobility cane, a constant battle they waged, Emily urging him to use it, Jason stubbornly resisting. But today, something felt different, a subtle shift in the atmosphere. "You're quiet today," Jason commented, tracing the raised dots of a braille page. "What's going on?" Emily hesitated, a palpable tension filling the air even before she spoke. "I need to tell you something." Jason straightened, his heart rate accelerating. "What is it?" Emily took a deep breath, the silence stretching taut. I received a job offer in another city." An invisible fist clenched around Jason's chest. It's an incredible opportunity," Emily rushed on, her voice strained. "A clinic specializing in sensory rehabilitation. They invited me to join their team." Silence descended, heavy, suffocating. The penthouse, once a gilded cage, now felt like a tomb. The thought of Emily leaving, of his world plunging back into absolute darkness. It was a blow he hadn't anticipated, hadn't prepared for. She was his rock, his light, his guide. Without her, how would he navigate the darkness? "Oh," was all he managed to say, his voice a whisper, barely audible. I haven't made a decision yet," Emily said quickly, trying to fill the gaping void left by his silence. "But I wanted to be honest with you, because this could change a lot of things." Jason swallowed hard, a lump forming in his throat. It sounds like a great opportunity," he managed, the words hollow, betraying the turmoil raging within him. "You should go." The hours that followed were a blur, a haze of disorientation. Jason tried to focus, to distract himself, but his thoughts relentlessly circled back to Emily, to the crushing weight of her potential departure. He knew she deserved this opportunity, this chance to advance her career, but the selfish, primal fear of losing her, of being plunged back into the abyss, consumed him. By evening, as they walked, or rather, Emily guided him, through Central Park, Jason finally found the courage to break the strained silence. "Emily," he began, his voice trembling slightly. What are you going to do?" She hesitated, her steps faltering. "I don't know," she admitted, her voice low. "I really want this chance, but I also don't know if I want to leave all of this behind." Jason knew all of this meant him, but was it in the way he desperately wished? Doubt gnawed at him, a persistent ache. He wanted to beg her to stay, to cling to her, to confess the depth of his love, but the fear of rejection, of being a burden, held him back. And what do you feel?" he asked, the words barely audible, his heart hammering against his ribs. Emily stopped walking, the air around them thickening with unspoken emotions. "Jason," she said, her voice soft, her hand finding his, You're special to me. More than I can put into words. I never expected to meet someone like you when I started working here." Jason's heart leaped, a wild, frantic bird in his chest, but he also detected a thread of pain, of uncertainty in her voice. Then why hesitate?" he pressed, trying to sound more confident than he felt, his hand tightening around hers. "Because, Jason," Emily said, her voice barely a whisper, I don't want you to feel like I'm giving something up for you. This has to be my choice, and it has to be something I truly want." Her words were sincere, honest, but they left Jason even more torn, more conflicted. He wanted to tell her, to confess the overwhelming love that threatened to consume him, to plead with her to stay, to reveal how utterly lost he would be without her. But the fear of scaring her away, of destroying the fragile equilibrium they'd built, paralyzed him. That night, Jason lay awake, replaying their conversation, Emily's words echoing in his mind. He realized, with a sickening lurch in his stomach, that if he didn't tell her how he truly felt, he might lose her anyway. But the prospect of laying his heart bare, of exposing his vulnerability, terrified him as much as the darkness he'd lived in for 2 years. The next day, Emily arrived later than usual, a subtle nervousness radiating from her. Jason tried to mask his anxiety, but his voice betrayed him. I thought you weren't coming today, he blurted out, the words sharper than he intended. I had some things to take care of, she said, her voice strained, avoiding his gaze. As they spent another strained afternoon together, Emily's distraction was palpable. Jason knew her decision, her future, hung heavy in the air. By the end of the day, desperation overriding fear, he finally gathered his courage. Emily, he said, his voice firmer than he expected, Can I invite you to a special dinner? Emily looked up, surprised by the change in his tone. Dinner? She echoed, a flicker of confusion in her eyes. What are you up to? Jason laughed, a nervous, shaky sound. It's nothing fancy, but I want to thank you for everything you've done for me, and I want to talk. Emily hesitated for a moment, the tension in her shoulders easing slightly. Then, a soft smile touched her lips. Of course, Jason, she said, her voice warmer now. I'd love to. As she left, Jason felt a maelstrom of emotions. Relief, anticipation, and a gut-wrenching fear. He knew this dinner was his chance, his only chance, to confess the truth of his heart. But he also knew that once the words were spoken, there would be no turning back. The penthouse terrace was transformed. A simple table, draped in white linen, 2 place settings, gleaming silverware, a single flickering candle at the center, casting a warm, intimate glow. Jason couldn't see the details, but he'd meticulously planned every element with his assistant's help, striving for a perfect, unspoken message. Emily arrived punctually, the soft click of the terrace door breaking the tense silence. Wow, Jason, she exclaimed, her voice filled with genuine surprise, clearly impressed. This is beautiful. He smiled nervously, feeling his face flush. I did my best. I wanted it to be special. Emily gently touched his arm, her fingers light on his skin. You succeeded. As they ate, the conversation danced around the edges of their unspoken feelings. Light, surface level, Jason's progress, their walks in the park, even his assistant's latest string of terrible jokes. Emily seemed more relaxed than Jason expected, but beneath the surface, he could still sense the weight of the unspoken words, the decision looming between them. When the meal was finished, Emily looked at him, a question in her eyes. So, she said, her voice soft, curious, what's this all about? Don't get me wrong, she added quickly, a playful smile touching her lips. I loved it, but it feels like there's something you want to tell me. Jason took a deep breath, the air thick with anticipation. The moment had arrived. Emily, he began, his voice low, earnest. You're right. There is something. Something I need to say. And I didn't know how. So I thought a special dinner might be the best way. Emily tilted her head, encouraging him to continue, her gaze unwavering, her presence a silent invitation. From the day you came into my life, Jason continued, his voice gaining strength. Everything changed. At first I thought you were just doing your job, but I soon realized it was more than that. You've helped me see the world in ways I never thought possible. Emily remained silent, her expression unreadable, but Jason could feel the shift in the air, the charged energy between them. I'm not just grateful for everything you've done for me, Emily, he said, the words tumbling out now, a dam finally breaking. I love you. Silence descended, heavy, absolute, stretching into an eternity. Jason's hands clenched beneath the table, nerves twisting in his stomach, fear a cold knot in his chest. Then Emily reached across the table, her hand finding his, her fingers intertwining with his. Jason, she said, her voice soft, trembling with emotion. I love you too. He froze, his breath catching in his throat, barely daring to believe what he'd just heard. You love me? He stammered, the words barely a whisper. Emily laughed, a sound of pure, unadulterated joy, tears welling in her eyes. Of course I do, Jason, she said, her voice thick with emotion. I I don't know how or when it happened, but being with you, it's the best part of my days. A wave of relief, of pure, unadulterated joy washed over Jason, so intense it almost buckled his knees. He laughed, a shaky, disbelieving sound, unable to contain the flood of emotions. I was so afraid, he confessed, his voice raw. Afraid you didn't feel the same way. I didn't have the courage to tell you, Emily interrupted, her voice gentle, reassuring. I know, she said, her thumb tracing circles on the back of his hand. They spent the rest of the evening talking, sharing whispered confessions, unspoken feelings finally given voice. It was as if an invisible weight had been lifted from both of them, a shared burden finally released. For the first time since the accident, Jason felt a sense of lightness, of hope, of a future unfolding, vibrant and real, with Emily by his side. As coffee was served, Emily shifted the conversation, her expression becoming more serious. Jason, she began, her voice soft but firm, now that we know that we want to build something together, there's something important I want to talk about. Jason raised an eyebrow, intrigued, a flicker of apprehension in his chest. What is it? Have you, Emily hesitated, her gaze searching his. Have you ever thought about trying that experimental surgery, the one they mentioned at the clinic? Jason fell silent, the question hanging heavy in the air. The surgery, a distant, almost forgotten possibility, a fragile hope he'd buried deep beneath layers of fear and resignation. I've thought about it, he admitted, his voice low, hesitant. But what if it doesn't work? I don't know if I can handle another disappointment. Emily squeezed his hand, her touch a silent reassurance. I know it's scary, Jason, she said, her voice gentle but firm. But you're strong. You're stronger than you know. Even if it doesn't work, you've already shown you can live and thrive without your sight. And if it does work, just imagine everything you'll get to see again. Jason knew she was right. The thought of regaining his vision, of seeing the world again, of seeing Emily, it was both terrifying and exhilarating, a dizzying mix of hope and fear. But with Emily beside him, her hand warm in his, he felt a flicker of courage, a spark of possibility. Do you think I can do it? He asked, his voice barely a whisper, seeking reassurance, seeking her unwavering belief. Emily smiled, her eyes shining even in the candlelight, her faith in him a tangible force. I've always believed in you, Jason. He took a deep breath, the scent of lilies and possibility filling his lungs. All right, he said, his voice gaining strength, resolve hardening his features. I'll try. He felt Emily's hand tighten around his, an anchor amidst the swirling currents of doubt and fear. That night, after Emily left, Jason was alone on the terrace, the city lights twinkling below, a vast, unknowable tapestry he couldn't yet see. He reflected on the evening, on the confession of love, on the daunting prospect of surgery. Hope and fear warred within him, a tumultuous sea of emotions. What if the surgery failed? What if nothing changed? What if... But deep down, beneath the layers of anxiety, a new feeling began to take root, a quiet, unwavering hope. With Emily by his side, anything felt possible. The next day, Jason found himself in a sterile doctor's office, the scent of antiseptic sharp in the air, listening to the surgeon's measured voice outlining the procedure. Every word, every technical detail amplified his anxiety, each syllable a hammer blow against his fragile hope. He already knew the surgery was experimental, success far from guaranteed, but hearing it spoken aloud, in the cold, clinical language of medicine, made the weight of the decision almost unbearable. Emily sat beside him, her presence a silent comfort, her hand resting lightly on his arm. He could sense her worry, her own anxieties mirroring his, but her touch was grounding, a lifeline in the storm. Jason, the doctor said, his voice serious, direct. We want to be clear. The surgery could restore partial or even full vision, but there's also a chance it might not change anything. Are you prepared for that? Jason swallowed hard, the lump in his throat constricting his airway. He felt Emily's hand squeeze his, a silent message of support, of unwavering belief. I am, Jason replied, his voice stronger than he felt, forcing a semblance of confidence he didn't fully possess. The days leading up to the surgery were a blur of activity, a whirlwind of hope and doubt. Emily was his constant companion, his unwavering support, guiding him through each step. Paperwork, pre-surgery exams, endless consultations, and late-night conversations dissecting every possible outcome. "Jason," Emily asked one evening as they walked through Central Park, the familiar paths now laden with the weight of uncertainty. Are you really okay with this?" He took a deep breath, the scent of pine and damp earth filling his senses, the rustle of leaves a fragile melody in the city's symphony. I don't know, Emily," he admitted, his voice low, honest. Part of me wants to believe it'll work, but another part is scared." "Scared of what?" Emily asked softly, her hand tightening on his arm, her voice laced with concern. He hesitated, searching for the words to articulate the swirling vortex of anxieties within him. "Scared of seeing the world again," he finally confessed, his voice barely a whisper, and realizing, "It's not how I imagine it, and scared that you're not how I imagine." Emily stopped walking, surprise flickering across her features, her hand releasing his arm. "You think seeing me will change how you feel about me?" she asked, her voice tinged with disbelief, a hint of hurt. "No," Jason answered quickly, vehemently, the denial automatic, instinctive. "No, of course not, but—" He struggled to articulate the fear, the illogical, irrational anxiety that gnawed at him. What if I've created too perfect an image of you in my mind?" Emily let out a light laugh, the sound breaking the tension, easing the suffocating weight of his fear. "Jason," she said, her voice gentle, amused, "perfection is overrated. What matters," she continued, her voice softening, becoming more intimate, "what truly matters is how we feel about each other, and that doesn't depend on what you see or don't see." He smiled, a genuine smile this time, relief flooding through him, chasing away the shadows of doubt. He reached for her arm, his hand finding hers, his fingers intertwining with hers. "You always know what to say," he murmured, his voice filled with gratitude, with love. The night before the surgery, Emily orchestrated a quiet ritual, a moment of peace amidst the storm of anticipation. She brought groceries to Jason's penthouse, transforming his sterile kitchen into a haven of warmth and familiar scents. As she chopped vegetables, the rhythmic thud of the knife against the cutting board, the sizzle of garlic and olive oil, the fragrant steam rising from the simmering pot, these were the melodies of their life, the comforting symphony of their shared existence. Jason listened, memorizing each sound, each subtle nuance as if capturing a precious moment in time. "You're so calm," he remarked, a hint of awe in his voice, watching Emily move with quiet grace around the kitchen. "Someone has to be," she said, laughing, a light, teasing sound. "If we both fall apart, we'll be a disaster." After dinner, they settled on the sofa, the city lights twinkling outside the panoramic windows, a distant, abstract beauty. "Jason," Emily said, her voice soft, earnest, "no matter what happens tomorrow, I want you to know I'm proud of you." Jason looked at her, surprised by the intensity in her voice. "Proud?" he echoed, confusion lacing his tone. "Yes," Emily affirmed, her gaze unwavering, her hand finding his. For having the courage to try, even though you're scared. That's already a victory." Her words resonated deep within him, a balm to his anxieties, a quiet strength anchoring him to the present moment. In that instant, Jason realized that no matter the outcome of the surgery, no matter what the future held, what truly mattered was Emily, her unwavering belief in him, her unwavering love, and he knew, with a certainty that resonated in his soul, that he didn't want to spend a single day of his life without her. That night, while Emily meticulously organized hospital paperwork, her quiet efficiency a comforting presence, an impulse, sudden and overwhelming, surged through Jason. He knew, with a clarity that startled him, that there was no more time for hesitation, no more room for doubt. "Emily," he said, his voice low, urgent, Can you stop for a moment?" She looked up, her brow furrowed with concern, a question in her eyes. "What is it?" Jason approached her, his heart pounding against his ribs, reaching for her hand, his touch tentative, trembling. There's something I need to tell you." Emily's eyes widened, a flicker of apprehension in their depths. You're scaring me," she joked, her voice strained, attempting to lighten the suddenly charged atmosphere. Jason smiled, a nervous, shaky smile, but his tone remained serious, earnest. I don't know what tomorrow will bring, he began, his voice thick with emotion. Maybe I'll see the world again. Or maybe everything will stay the same. But one thing I'm certain of, no matter what happens, I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Emily fell silent, her breath catching in her throat, her eyes widening, filling with tears. Time seemed to stretch, to hold its breath, suspended in the charged silence. Then, a slow smile bloomed on Emily's face, radiant, incandescent, tears streaming down her cheeks, a mixture of joy and disbelief. "Yes, Jason," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "Yes, of course I will." He exhaled, a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding, relief flooding through him, chasing away the lingering shadows of fear. He pulled Emily into his arms, holding her tight, the scent of her perfume a familiar comfort, a promise of a shared future. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion, burying his face in her hair. "Thank you for what?" Emily murmured, her voice muffled against his chest. For being my light," Jason whispered, his voice breaking, when everything felt lost. The next morning, as Emily helped him prepare for the hospital, her touch gentle, reassuring, Jason felt a surprising calm settle over him. Fear still lingered, a dull ache in his chest, but beneath it, a quiet certainty bloomed. A certainty of love, of connection, of a shared future, regardless of the surgery's outcome. He knew, with unwavering conviction, that a brighter future awaited him, not because of the surgery, but because of Emily, because of the love they shared, a love that transcended sight, that illuminated even the darkest corners of his soul. "Are you ready for this?" Emily asked softly, her hand finding his, her gaze searching his eyes, seeking reassurance, offering unwavering support. Jason took a deep breath, meeting her gaze, his voice steady, filled with newfound resolve. "Ready," he affirmed, his fingers intertwining with hers, her touch a source of strength, a tangible reminder of the love that surrounded him. "Ready, because with you, I can face anything." The operating room was a silent, sterile space, save for the rhythmic beeping of monitors, the hushed whispers of the medical team. Jason lay on the table, heart pounding, a nervous flutter in his stomach, the cool touch of Emily's hand a comforting anchor in the storm of his emotions. She had been his constant companion through every step of this journey, her unwavering presence a source of strength, a beacon of hope. And now, her firm grip, her silent reassurance, felt like a lifeline. "It's going to be okay," she whispered, her voice a steady anchor in the swirling vortex of Jason's anxieties, her words a balm to his fear. He took a deep breath, forcing a faint smile, more for her reassurance than his own. Within minutes, the anesthetics began to take effect, a slow, creeping fog descending, and then darkness. When Jason opened his eyes, the world remained stubbornly, relentlessly dark. He blinked several times, a frantic, desperate attempt to coax light into the void, but nothing changed. The sterile white room, the hushed voices, the lingering scent of antiseptic, all sensory fragments, but no light, no visual confirmation of reality. The doctor stood beside him, his face impassive, monitoring the initial stages of recovery. "Jason," he said, his voice measured, professional. "The surgery was technically successful. Now we wait. Your brain," he explained, his voice devoid of emotion, "will need time to process the changes, to possibly reconnect the visual pathways." Jason nodded, numb, trying to absorb the doctor's words, the clinical detachment, the stark reality of the situation. It was as he had feared. No guarantees, no miracle cure, just waiting. "How long?" Emily asked, her voice barely a whisper, breaking the tense silence, the unspoken question hanging heavy in the air. It's hard to say," the doctor admitted, his tone softening slightly, a hint of empathy entering his voice. "It could be days, weeks, even months. But I want you both to focus on any small signs. Even the slightest change will be a good indicator." Emily thanked the doctor, her voice strained, and gently helped Jason to his feet, her arm supporting him as they left the hospital, the weight of uncertainty a heavy shroud around them. The days that followed were a grueling test of patience, of resilience, of fragile hope against the crushing weight of disappointment. Jason spent hours by the penthouse windows, straining his eyes, willing them to see, desperate for any change, any flicker of light, any faint glimmer in the relentless darkness. He knew, intellectually, that immediate results were unlikely, that the doctor had cautioned against unrealistic expectations. But the waiting, the agonizing uncertainty, was suffocating. Emily remained his steadfast anchor, her unwavering support a lifeline in the choppy waters of despair. She filled his days with gentle encouragement, with quiet companionship, with attempts to distract him from the gnawing anxiety, conversations, readings, even playful moments, forced laughter echoing in the sterile silence of the penthouse. But Jason knew, beneath her cheerful facade, Emily was just as anxious, just as desperate for a sign, any sign, that the surgery had worked, that hope wasn't a cruel illusion. Have you noticed anything?" Emily asked one morning, her voice hesitant, fragile, as she prepared coffee in the kitchen, the familiar aroma a small comfort in the pervasive unease. Jason shook his head, frustration a bitter taste on his tongue. "Nothing," he said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. It's like nothing's changed." Emily walked over to him, her steps measured, deliberate, taking his hands in hers, her grip firm, unwavering. "Don't give up, Jason," she said, her voice soft but resolute, her gaze locking with his, her emerald eyes shining with unwavering belief. "Remember what the doctor said. It could take time, and even if it takes longer, we'll face it together." Jason nodded, gratitude welling within him, a fragile warmth in the cold void of disappointment. He was grateful for her support, for her unwavering faith, but the doubt, insidious and persistent, still gnawed at him, a relentless undercurrent of despair. One night, lying in bed, Emily asleep beside him, her breathing soft and even, Jason reflected on the profound transformation his life had undergone since Emily had entered his darkness. He still couldn't see the world, but Emily had illuminated it in ways he'd never imagined, revealing depths of beauty, of connection, of resilience he'd never known existed. She had taught him to feel the world, to hear its symphony, to smell its fragrant tapestry, to taste its myriad flavors, to touch its textures, to find beauty in the absence of light. "Even if I never see again," he thought, a quiet acceptance settling within him, I already have enough." But deep down, beneath the layers of acceptance, a fragile ember of hope still flickered, refusing to be extinguished. The next morning, Emily suggested a walk in Central Park, a familiar ritual, a shared space of quiet companionship. "I think," she said, her voice bright, determined, pulling Jason gently by the hand, "I think we both need some fresh air." He grumbled, a half-hearted protest, but eventually relented, allowing her to guide him. Being outdoors, amidst the sounds and scents of nature, always had a way of clearing his mind, of easing the suffocating weight of anxiety. As they walked, Emily described the world around them, painting vivid pictures with words, the riot of colors bursting from the flower beds, the clear, cloudless blue of the New York sky, the vibrant energy of the city swirling around them. Jason listened intently, absorbing her words, his imagination conjuring images, fragments of a world he yearned to see. But his attention, his senses, were focused on something else, something subtle, almost imperceptible, a faint tremor in the darkness. "Emily," he said suddenly, his voice catching in his throat, stopping abruptly, his hand gripping her arm, his senses heightened, straining to discern the elusive change. Emily stopped immediately, concern flooding her face. "What is it? What's wrong?" Jason remained silent, his brow furrowed, his eyes squeezed shut, focusing, processing the strange, unfamiliar sensation. I think," he stammered, his voice barely a whisper, "I think I saw something." Emily held her breath, her heart leaping in her chest, a wild, impossible hope surging within her. "What?" she whispered, her voice trembling, barely audible. "What did you see, Jason?" I'm not sure," he stammered, his voice still hesitant, uncertain. It's not clear, but I think I noticed something, like a change in the light." He tilted his face towards the sky, towards the direction of the sun, the warmth on his skin a familiar sensation. But now there was something else, something new, something from different. For the first time in 2 years, he felt as though something was piercing through the darkness, a subtle shift in perception, a faint distinction between light and shadow, a glimmer of possibility in the vast, impenetrable void. Something that had once seemed impossible, a miracle he dared not to dream of, was, perhaps, beginning to unfold. Emily gasped, her hands flying to her mouth, tears welling in her eyes, overwhelming emotion flooding her features. She reached out, her hands trembling, cupping his face, her touch gentle, reverent. "This is incredible, Jason," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion, disbelief mingling with incandescent joy. It's a start." "Is it?" he asked, his voice still laced with uncertainty, the fragile hope warring with years of ingrained despair. "Of course it is," Emily replied, her voice brimming with excitement, her belief in him unwavering, a tangible force. "Of course it is," she repeated, her smile radiant, chasing away the lingering shadows of doubt. Let's tell the doctor," she said, her voice breathless, her eyes shining with tears of joy and hope. And let's keep believing." Jason smiled, a slow, hesitant smile at first, then widening, becoming brighter, genuine, a small spark of hope reigniting within him, a fragile flame in the darkness. It might be faint, barely perceptible, a whisper of possibility, but to Jason, in that moment, it was enough. Enough to keep trying, enough to keep believing, enough to keep hoping. Days later, the wedding day arrived, a crisp autumn afternoon in New York City, the air filled with the promise of change, of new beginnings. Jason woke early, a maelstrom of emotion swirling within him. Anxiety, anticipation, a surreal sense of unreality. He was about to marry Emily, the woman who had illuminated his darkness, who had painted color back into his monochrome world, who had given him a reason to hope, to fight, to live again. Ethan, his best man, his lifelong friend, walked into the hotel suite, a reassuring presence, a familiar face in the whirlwind of emotions. "Ready for the big day, man?" Ethan asked, a light pat on Jason's shoulder, a comforting gesture of camaraderie. Jason chuckled nervously, a shaky, uncertain sound. "Ready or not," he replied, forcing a smile, "it looks like it's here." Ethan pulled up a chair, settling beside him, his expression serious, supportive. "Emily is amazing, Jason," he said, his voice low, earnest. "You know that, and you deserve to be happy. Don't let anything ruin this moment." Jason nodded, gratitude for Ethan's unwavering friendship welling within him. He knew Ethan was right. He took a deep breath, trying to calm the frantic flutter of nerves in his stomach, the tremor in his hands. Hours later, Jason stood at the altar, in the penthouse garden overlooking Central Park, his heart racing, a frantic drumbeat against his ribs. The garden was a vision of ethereal beauty, white and lilac flowers cascading from trellises, a soft, romantic fragrance lingering in the air, the murmur of hushed conversations from Manhattan's elite guests, the rustle of silk and chiffon, creating an atmosphere of hushed anticipation. "Everything okay?" Ethan asked, standing beside him, his voice a low murmur, concern etched on his face. I think so," Jason replied, his voice strained, barely audible. "Just nervous." "That's normal," Ethan reassured him, a comforting pat on his back. "Once Emily walks in, all the nerves will disappear." Jason tried to smile, a weak, tremulous attempt, but the weight of the moment, the gravity of the promise he was about to make made his hands clammy, his breath shallow. He adjusted his tie for the third time, feeling the frantic thumping of his heart echo in his ears, a deafening rhythm in the sudden silence. Then, the music changed. The first notes of the wedding march, soft and ethereal, filled the garden, a familiar melody, a timeless promise of love and commitment. Silence descended over the assembled guests, a collective breath held, anticipation hanging heavy in the air. Jason felt the atmosphere shift, a palpable change, as if the entire world held its breath, waiting, watching. He knew, with a certainty that resonated in his soul, that Emily was about to enter, and that's when it happened. Jason felt something different. A flicker, a sudden, unexpected flash of light, a fleeting sensation that registered somewhere deep within his consciousness, like a distant lightning bolt in the darkness. He blinked, confusion warring with disbelief, his heart skipping a beat. Another flash, stronger this time, more defined, less ephemeral. He held his breath, a strange, almost magical sensation washing over him, tingling behind his eyes, a prickle of possibility in the void. "Jason?" Ethan asked, his voice low, urgent, noticing the sudden tension in his friend's posture, the strange, almost incredulous expression on his face. Jason, are you okay? I. I think, Jason stammered, his voice barely above a whisper, his tone incredulous, disbelieving. I think I'm seeing something. As Emily began her walk down the aisle towards him, towards their future, the flashes became more frequent, more intense, more real. At first, just blurs of light, indistinct shapes in the darkness, then gradually, vaguely, forms began to materialize like ghosts in the fog, slowly, agonizingly taking shape. And then he saw her. Emily's white dress, an ethereal vision, seemed to float around her, a cloud of ivory silk, moving towards him with a grace that stole his breath. Her hair, elegantly styled, adorned with delicate white flowers, a halo of light around her face. Her smile, hesitant at first, then widening, blooming, radiant, a sunrise breaking over a snow-capped mountain. And Jason felt the world pause, the music fade, the breath of the assembled guests held captive, as he watched her, as he truly saw her, for the first time in 2 long, agonizing years. Tears, hot and unstoppable.